Okay, Biology 2, welcome back again for our flipping lesson. We are going to continue with Chapter 21, Section 2, the classification of the different types of fungi. Last time we discussed the common molds and we discussed the sac fungi. So today we are going to move on to the next two that we have. So the first one, I guess technically the third one, is going to be the club fungi. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the characteristics of what are the club fungi. And the club fungi are known as the phylum Basidiomycota, and that gets its name from the specialized reproductive structure that resembles a club, and this structure is called the basidium. So the basidium right there, that is the most important term that we're going to look for here. Just like the Ascomycota was named for the ascus, the Basidiomycota is named for the basidium. So if you guys can see here, there's a little club-like structure. It has 3 spores at the end, and if we could see farther down, we could definitely see that it has a definite club-like structure, like almost something beat somebody over the head with or something like that. So that is where the Basidiomycota gets its name. The big, most important thing is the basidium. And again, going back to the life cycle, the other ones, the first two said they both had asexual and sexual reproduction. Well, now we're just saying that this has an extremely elaborate life cycle. So the book doesn't even go into how elaborate this life cycle is because it is that confusing. So again, that's just another reason why we don't need to know the specifics of each individual's life cycle. We just need to know general terms, because if you think about it, if you're walking around the woods and you see one of these laying around, you're not going to want to know what its life cycle is. You're going to want to know how to identify it. So Basidiomycetes, just remember that they have the extremely elaborate life cycle. And so the diversity of the club fungi, some examples, they include shelf fungi, puffballs, earth stars, jelly fungi, and rusts. Didn't give you an example of some of the other ones that we saw yesterday, the Ascomycota, so we're going to see some of those later, but here's one example of a puffball. As you can see, its name pretty self-explanatory there. It looks like a ball, and a reason why they are called puffballs is they actually shoot their spores up in the air. So that's another pretty interesting fungi. So that is about it for the club fungi. So we're going to remember about them. Let's see, we go back through here. They have a basidium, which is the club-like structure, an elaborate life cycle, and they include things like the shelf fungi and the puffballs. So those are kind of our main keys there, and again, that's one of the examples. So moving on to our last group, these are called the imperfect fungi. So the imperfect fungi are just, we're going to look at the characteristics of some of them and why they are actually called imperfect. So their name is a Deuteromycota, and they've kind of been just like a catch-all group because they cannot be placed in any other group or phyla because researchers have never been able to observe a sexual phase in their life cycles. So we've talked about the life cycles of each one, and if I asked you what is the life cycle of a Deuteromycota, we would say, well, researchers have never been able to observe their sexual phase, so we don't know. So that is how they are grouped and why they kind of all fall into this one category. And kind of one really famous example from this group is penicillium. I'm sure, or penicillium is where the name of the fungus, and it gave rise to the drug penicillin. As you may be able to see if you see my pointer there, it's that green one right there is the actual penicillium fungus growing, and again that it provides a very powerful antibiotic that is basically saved millions of lives in wars. So we might get into the story of that a little bit later, but now just know for the imperfect fungi we have penicillium as an example, and let's see what else do we have here. They're the Deuteromycota, or the imperfect fungi. They haven't been able to observe their sexual phase in their life cycle. And they would maybe say their distinguishing characteristic is they really don't have one. This is just like a catch-all group where they put ones where they couldn't find any other place for them to fit. So that wraps it up for our classification. I have a few more things that I feel like this chapter should have covered, but the book did not fail to mention. So the first one is some examples of the Ascomycota. I think these are ones you might be familiar with. The morels, I know they're very popular. Those are some of the better ones to eat that you can find, and I'm pretty sure you can find them anywhere around here. And another one is truffles. Those aren't just chocolate, they're actually mushrooms that do grow in the ground. An interesting thing about them is pigs actually will sniff them out. So that's another interesting thing. And then a couple structures that they forgot to mention. They did mention the mycelium, they did mention the hyphae, they did mention the fruiting body. But the fruiting body is composed of some other key points here. So first one would be the stalk, which is that, as you can see, that base that grows up with the red line pointing to it. And then the gills, which that's where a lot of the spores are going to be found, where a lot of those ascuses and the basidium are going to be found. And that is those lines you can see there. And then the cap is just the term for the top part. Usually you might see it folded over. So that wraps it up for fungi classification, and then just a couple maybe extra tidbits that I thought they should have had. So let me know if you have any questions.